You say glamour, and I say glamour.
You say hammer, I say hammer.
Dean Martin had 3 wives, but only one sat quietly in the shadows, watching him fade away. Night after night, Jean Martin returned to the same corner table, in the same dimly lit restaurant, where her ex-husband now dined alone. The man the world once knew as the King of Cool had become a ghost of himself, and she saw every painful step of that decline. She had lived through his affairs, his drinking, the wild nights and stage lights. But nothing could prepare her, or him, for what happened in 1987. A tragedy so gut-wrenching, so soul-shattering, that even Frank Sinatra said Dean died that day, even if his body lived on. Jean couldn't save him, but she never left his side. Not really. Dean Martin's story didn't begin in Hollywood, but in the gritty streets of Steubenville, Ohio. Born Dino Paul Crocetti on June 7, 1917, to Italian immigrant parents, he was no stranger to hardship. But no one could have predicted the rise, or the heartbreak, that would define him. Dean Martin was born Dino Paul Crocetti to a life far removed from red carpets and Rat Pack fame. His father, Gaetano Gano Crocetti, had immigrated from Montesilvano, Italy in 1913, carving out a modest living as a barber in the working-class neighborhoods of Steubenville, Ohio. His mother, Angela, though born in Ohio, was raised in a home steeped in northern Italian traditions. At home, Dino heard only Italian. He didn't speak a single word of English until the age of 5. His childhood was filled with the comforting smells of homemade pasta, the melancholy melodies of Italian folk songs, and the silent weight of poverty as the Great Depression tightened its grip. But outside the safety of home, life turned cold. When Dino entered Grant Elementary School, his thick Italian accent made him a target. Classmates mocked him, mimicked his broken English, and reminded him daily that he didn't belong. In an America that still viewed immigrants with suspicion, young Dino was seen not as a boy, but as a foreigner. That pain of exclusion stayed with him. And yet, in time, it would become the very soul of his charm, the smooth voice, the relaxed swagger, and the effortless cool that would later win over millions, all forged in the fire of rejection and resilience. Dino never quite fit in, and he knew it. The teasing, the mockery, the feeling of being an outsider stung deeply. But instead of fighting back with fists, he sharpened his wit. Humor became his armor. Charm became his shield. And long before the world would know him as Dean Martin, the boy from Steubenville was already learning how to win over a crowd just to survive. By his teenage years, Dino had grown restless and disillusioned with school. He dropped out in the 10th grade, boldly claiming he was smarter than his teachers. Textbooks didn't hold his attention, the streets did. His family was struggling, and the promise of fast money was far more tempting than any diploma. He plunged headfirst into Steubenville's gritty underbelly, working brutal shifts in steel mills and then drifting into a far more dangerous world, bootlegging, gambling, and running liquor, first during Prohibition, and then well after it ended. At just 16, Dino was already navigating the risky, volatile terrain of Ohio's criminal underground. He learned how to read people fast, how to talk his way out of trouble, and how to keep his cool when everything was on the line. For a brief period, he even stepped into the boxing ring under the name Kid Crochet, fighting 12 matches as a welterweight. With trademark dry humor, he would later joke, "I won all but 11." But behind the humor was grit, survival, and a boy growing into the man who would one day rule Hollywood, with a drink in his hand, a song in his voice, and secrets buried deep behind that famous smile. His time in the ring left him with scars, a cut lip, a broken nose, and broken fingers because he couldn't pay for hand wraps. After many years, his nose was fixed by comic Lou Costello. Even though the change was small, the surgery made him look like a Maine man. Dino lived with his friend Sonny King in a small room in New York while he followed his dreams. They were so poor that they fought with no gloves in their living room. People paid $5 each to see them fight until one of them passed out. They made about $50 a night, which is close to $1,000 today. In order to let the other person finish their food, they even played tricks on other people at the table. The owner saw what was going on and let them both eat for a nickel. When they got rich years later, they each paid him $25,000 back. Dean also had a job as a courier in a bank that was hidden behind a smoke shop. At night, he watched for police raids and spun roulette wheels. Later that night, he sang in clubs under the name Dino Martini, which came from the name of an opera singer, Nino Martini. But Sammy Watkins, who was his boss, told him he should change his name to Dean Martin. It didn't sound as Italian, which helped him get into show business at a time when racial names could be used against you. That change made things possible. It was with the Ernie Mackay Orchestra that Dean got his big break. He found his voice there. He got his smooth, easy style from Harry Mills and Perry Coe, which helped him become popular. He copied their sound at first, but soon he made it his own. His easy, friendly voice made him stand out and won people over. In 1946, it all began in Atlantic City. At the 500 Club, Dean Martin was singing. Jerry Lewis was putting on his crazy comedy show. One after the other, they were booked. But one night, their one-person shows didn't work. The owner was going to fire them. So they could get help, they tried something new. They jumped on stage together. Martin sang, and Lewis kept talking and doing crazy things. Martin replied with a cool, serious laugh. The crowd went crazy. The club was full of laughter. The owner quickly blocked them again. What started out as a last-ditch attempt turned out to be a great comedy. They hit it off right away. Martin's smooth charm went well with Lewis's crazy energy. Their show quickly became the hottest thing on the East Coast. A lot of people wanted more. They mixed music, humor, and quick improvisation in a way that no one else had before, and it changed nightclub comedy forever. In 1948, Hollywood picked up the phone. The deal between Martin and Lewis and Halby Wallace was signed. Wallace was well known for making Casablanca. The deal was not worth much money, each person got $75,000. Freedom was important, though. Wallace let them decide everything about their routines. It was rare. Most of the time, studios had strict rules for stars, but Martin and Lewis were free to write and perform freely. A lot of people thought this was a bad idea. They were still new to film after all. It did work, though. Their movies had the same crazy, sudden spark as their live shows. It didn't matter how little the pay was. In those days, not many stars had artistic freedom and the chance to make their own path. The two worked together on 16 movies from 1949 to 1956. From My Friend Irma to Hollywood or Bust, they did it all. That's more than 2 movies every year. Their movies did really well. They were one of the top 10 movie stars in America by the early 1950s. They were number 1 in 1952. Big names like John Wayne and Bing Crosby didn't sell as many as they did. They were loved by everyone. Everyone thought Jerry Lewis was the real star. Look magazine put Lewis on the cover by himself in 1954. Their cuts left Martin out. This was a slap in the face for Martin. He wasn't just the good guy. He was also famous. Now, though, it seemed like no one noticed. That cover was the last straw. Things that were getting tense finally came to a head. Martin did not feel seen. They became farther apart. There were cracks in their friendship, which used to make their act stand out. By 1956, everything was over. There was one last fight while they were making Hollywood or Bust. Martin told Lewis he was just a dollar sign because he was tired and mad. It was all in that one line. Martin thought he was being used. He thought that their partnership was no longer about art or friendship but about making money. They didn't talk to each other for 20 years after they broke up. Fans were shocked. The group that made humor what it was had broken up. Both men felt bad about what they did for decades. Their story showed how fame and wealth can make people fight with each other. What the words, "nothing more than a dollar sign," stood for was how show business can betray even the best friends and family. Dean Martin's first few years as a solo artist were rough. It was his first movie without Jerry Lewis, and it came out in 1957. It was meant to be the start of something new. Instead, it almost put an end to his career. The cost of making the movie was $1,999,000. It only made $1,905,000 at the theaters. That was a huge loss at the time, nearly $1.2 million. Some critics were harsh. They said the story wasn't very deep and Martin's acting was off. In Hollywood, some people said Martin wouldn't be able to make it on his own. It hurt him a lot to fail. A lot of people at MGM and in the media started to write him off. He didn't want to give up, though. He did something brave in 1958. He gave up a lot of money to be in the Young Lions. Instead of the $250,000 he got for 10,000 rooms. Only $20,000 was agreed upon. Tony Randall was meant to play that part. Even though the studio didn't want Martin, his boss called and made the offer. Martin said he'd do it for free. People like Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift backed him. They wouldn't start filming without Martin. The way he played the part in the movie changed everything. He showed that he was as good as two of Hollywood's best talents. His movie career was saved by that risk, which also showed how deep he was as an actor. Martin's magic had always included music. This was his big hit in 1953. That's Amor went to number 2 in the US and became a classic. Memories Are Made of This sold over 1 million copies and reached number 1 in 1955. The real surprise, though, came in 1964. For a short time, Martin's Everybody Loves Somebody beat A Hard Day's Night to the top of the charts. After the Beatles took over the American music scene that year, he was the only traditional pop star who could break their hold. He signed his name with the song, and the words are still carved on his tombstone. Martin's big break as an actor came with Rio Bravo in 1959. John Wayne and him were both in the movie Dude, which was about a drunk cop. Many people didn't think Martin could handle such a serious part, but he shocked everyone. He made the man he played fight his problems feel real and raw. It was the highest-grossing Western of that year, with over $10.5 million in ticket sales. Martin and Wayne became friends off-screen and on, which added to the power of the movie. This part took away the idea that Martin was only a singer or comedic sidekick. It wasn't just any old band getting together when Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford got together. It was the start of something bigger. They were known as the Rat Pack. And they changed culture in America for good. This wasn't just a bunch of artists. The family brought swagger, fun, and a whole new level of cool to the stage. They lived what they did, not just did it. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, when Sinatra was in charge, their friendship became famous. They filled the Sands Hotel with music, laughter, and nights that will never be forgotten. Las Vegas became the place of dreams because of their wild parties, funny jokes, and charm. People still talk about that time as the best in Vegas history. In 1960, they went on one of their most famous trips when they made Ocean's 11. Think about this. The movie would be filmed in a Las Vegas casino with only one light on. 5 in the morning. When there was no one else around. After that, they would go straight to the Sands to play night shows that were packed to the brim. The movie was shot in places like the Riviera, the Sands, and the Flamingo. It didn't matter much about the lines. They kept the energy going with cue cards. It was a big deal when it came out on August 3, 1960. The mix of work, play, and just having fun made things better. They were more than just singers and artists. They were living out stories that were made up about them. The way they talked was part of what made them magical. There was a lot of gambling in death. Everyday people were Clyde. That was in Dolesville, Ohio, not Las Vegas. The slang they used kept people outside of their group wondering and showed how close they were. Nothing about who they were could stay the same. Some people in the press liked Rat Pack, but Sinatra thought it was better. It was more than just a name. It meant strength, beauty, and friendship. They were famous in more than one field. They were able to get to know President John F. Kennedy through Peter Lawford, who was married to Patricia Kennedy. At the Democratic gathering in 1960, they sang the national anthem, and Sinatra's High Hopes became a war song. These dogs helped Kennedy win over America for a short time. But politics has its own rules. In 1962, Robert Kennedy told John F. Kennedy to cut links with Sinatra because he was linked to the mob. That was the end of their political story. But for a while, they were very powerful. The FBI kept a close eye on everything behind the scenes. Some casinos, like the Sands and Sahara, were linked to the mob, where the Rat Pack played. It didn't help that Sinatra was friends with guys like Sam Johanna. They were then subject to wiretaps, files, and probes. Vegas had lots of money, crime, and shows. The Rat Pack was in the middle of it all. This group of people added to the magic and danger of that world. Then TV came along. He agreed to do a comedy show for NBC in 1965. Martin asked for things that couldn't be done to say no. It was his dream to only work one day a week, skip practices, and get paid a lot of money. He was shocked when NBC accepted. The Dean Martin Show was born. Martin did not make things hard. A few hours a week, he read from cue cards and didn't care if he got them wrong. What people saw was what really happened. For 264 episodes, the show was a hit thanks to its fun and ease. NBC even paid $34 million to keep it going. On Thursday nights, Martin was the coolest person in the world. The picture of him drinking was all part of the act. He looked like the fun-loving, drunk playboy on stage. But apple juice, not whiskey, was often in the glass. It was proven by his children. Sinatra made fun of the fact that he spilled more than Martin drank. Martin liked quiet nights at home when he wasn't on stage. The drunk act did exactly what it said it would do, it made people feel calm. Martin's entry was one of the best parts of the show. He would slide down a fireman's pole with a cigarette in his hand once a week, as if nothing could worry him. It was a great way to start an hour of fun where anything could happen. Since the variety show stopped in 1974, Martin's roasts have been going strong. It was a must-see TV event from 1974 to 1984 to watch Dean Martin roast famous people. A lot of famous people came to joke around and with each other. Some of them are Bob Hope, Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball, and many more. Martin always wore a tux and had a whiskey in his hand. He led the fun by reading from cue cards, which made everyone laugh and showed that his cool style never went out of style. He married Elizabeth and Betty McDonald in 1941, which was the start of his first marriage. His job was just beginning to take off. They had 4 kids together, Craig, Claudia, Gail, and Dana. But life wasn't happy behind closed doors. Betty had a terrible problem with drinking. She often went missing for long periods of time, leaving behind a lot of mental damage. But Martin's affairs were known to everyone. As his fame grew, more and more women saw him at parties and bars. The marriage got worse and worse. Some people thought Betty drank more because Martin was cheating on her. Some people said Martin cheated on Betty because she drank too much. They were done by 1949. Martin got full control of the kids, and Betty quietly lost sight of the public eye. She died in 1989 in San Francisco, where she had lived her whole life. People never saw this pain. They only saw Martin's easy charm. Martin got married again not long after that. His marriage to Jean Beggar began on September 1, 1949, just a few weeks after that. The wedding was very fancy and big. He had Jerry Lewis as his best man. They were together for 24 years. Jean took care of their 3 kids and Martin's kids from his first marriage as well. They looked like a great family from the outside. It didn't stop Martin, though. The tabloids loved writing about his relationships. Being famous and having a busy job put a lot of stress on him. Martin's solo success took off after he broke up with Jerry Lewis in the 1960s. But the urges also got stronger. The marriage was over by December 1969. In 1973, they got a divorce. John never married again. John was with Martin when their son Dean Paul died in 1987. Though they were no longer married, they stayed close. In his 2005 book, Jerry Lewis said, "John was the best thing that ever happened to Dean next to me." Many people didn't see what he did. John's kindness, her dedication, and her ability to overlook Martin's flaws. That quote showed how complicated Martin's relationships were. There were friendships, broken hearts, and loyalty that went beyond how people saw him. Martin tried getting married again. The wedding took place on April 25, 1973. At the time, the wedding was very fancy and cost up to $100,000. There were 22 boxes of white doves and French lilacs. Catherine used to work in Beverly Hills as a receptionist at a hair shop. All of a sudden, she was a Hollywood star. Martin took Sasha in as his own daughter. Sasha used to be in movies and soap shows. She married Martin and became a Martin family member, but the marriage didn't last. It was over by 1976. Martin's biographers say that his heart was still with Jean. Some people say it wasn't easy to combine the families. After the split, Catherine stayed out of the public eye. The last time she was seen was at Martin's funeral in 1995. Martin had a lot of problems that made him look cool and charming. Before, his drinking was just part of his act. Now it was real. It got worse over time. His friends could see that it was bad for his health, his work, and his relationships. He was depressed everywhere he went. He hid it by making jokes and smiling a lot. There was always pain, though. The Martin family was in a terrible accident on March 21, 1987, that would change them for all time. Dean Paul Martin was the oldest son of the famous performer Dean Martin. He died on a military training trip when he was only 35 years old. Dean Paul was in charge of an F-4C Phantom II jet for the California Air National Guard that day. It looked like a simple task at first. He and 2 other jets took off from California's Riverside County's March Air Force Base. But the weather got very dangerous. Heavy snow fell on the San Bernardino Mountains, hiding everything in thick clouds and snow that was so bright it was blinding. Because the jets couldn't see anything in front of them, they had to use infrared. The people who run air travel knew there was a risk. They worked hard to get the jets away from the mountains, but they couldn't move quickly enough because the radio readings were bad and the airspace was full. At about 400 miles per hour, Dean Paul's jet crashed into a rock. He and his weapons officer, Captain Ramon Ortiz, died right away in the crash. The plane was pretty much destroyed. Search teams fought the bad weather for 6 days straight to find the remains. The bodies of both men were airlifted out when they finally found the spot. The disaster shocked everyone in the country, not just the troops. And it broke Dean Martin's heart so badly that it could never be fixed. Dean Martin had constantly called Dean Paul his golden boy. That wasn't just a nickname. It confirmed how proud and deeply connected he felt to his son. They were not just father and son. They had been near friends. The day Dean Paul died became the day something inner Dean Martin died, too. His pals noticed the trade right away. Rich Little, who knew him nicely, later said, as soon as he lost his son. That changed into the end of him. Martin's daughter, Dina, remembered how her father's joy regarded to vanish overnight. The man who had once been full of existence, humor, and attraction now seemed lost. He stored to himself. He stopped going out. Whilst human beings did see him, he turned into often on my own on the same restaurant, carrying the equal clothes, ordering the same meal. His grief showed in his face, and people closest to him stated he in no way in reality came back from it. On the time of the crash, Dean Martin were getting ready for something big, a live performance excursion with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. It changed into referred to as the ultimate event. Lovers had been excited to look the Rat Percent together again, and tens of millions of greenbacks had been at stake. But after dropping his son, Martin couldn't move on. He managed to carry out a few suggestions, but his heart wasn't in it. He left the excursion early, leaving enthusiasts disenchanted, and his friendships with Sinatra and Davis strained. After that, Dean Martin stepped away from the general public eye. He stopped recording new songs. He stopped acting in public. Dean Martin's final years had been packed with disappointment and silence. His ex-wife, John, would regularly sit at a nearby desk inside the identical restaurant, quietly watching him. It turned into as if she become looking over a man she not knew. Martin, who as soon as charmed the world with his smile and voice, now appeared like a lifeless parent. Keck, who noticed them often, stated Martin seemed like a wax parent, barely moving. John's presence wasn't by way of danger. It felt like she changed into mourning him even as he changed into nevertheless alive. That they had shared so much in existence, along with the horrible lack of their son, Dean Paul, in 1987. Now, their bond turned into one among shared sorrow. Night after night time, Gene's quiet watch showed just how alone Martin had ended up. Even as his fitness declined, Martin saved pronouncing he might return to the level. He advised human beings, "I'll be again on that degree someday. You'll see me." However, those close to him knew it wasn't actual. The spark that had once lit up his performances become gone. His promise had become an unhappy reminder of what he was once. Martin couldn't let pass of the idea that he changed into still a performer. However, the International had already moved on. He changed into left with only reminiscences and dreams that could in no way come true. Paul Anka, a near buddy, found out the darkest fact. Martin as soon as instructed him, "I'm simply waiting to die." Simply ready to die, those words showed the intensity of his melancholy. For a man who had once thrilled millions, it changed into surprising. He now not noticed a purpose to move on. The loss of his son had broken him. His lifestyles, each on degree and at domestic, had fallen apart. Martin, the star recognized for his charm and humor, turned into now a person misplaced in grief, watching for the give-up. In September 1993, medical doctors at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center instructed Martin he had lung-most cancers. They entreated him to have surgery on his kidneys and liver. The surgical treatment should supply him extra time, but Martin refused. He had commenced smoking as a teen and had lived with cigarettes for decades. While confronted with this chance to combat, he chose now not to. Buddies believed the loss of Dean Paul had left him too heartbroken to keep struggling with. That 12 months, Martin did cease smoking, however it became too overdue. His refusal of surgical operation showed a person prepared to accept the quit on his very own terms. By using 1995, Martin not often left his Beverly Hills home. His health failed rapid. Years of smoking had destroyed his lungs. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1995, Martin died from acute breathing failure caused by emphysema. He turned into 78. The reality that he died on Christmas made the loss feel even sadder. A day supposed for family and joy became a day of mourning. Frank Sinatra referred to as him a brother, no longer by blood, but by way of choice. Martin's loss of life ended a generation. Lovers the world over felt the lack of a voice and charm that had shaped a technology. Las Vegas paid tribute to the man who helped construct its legend. On December 28, 1995, the Strip went dark. The lighting of the Sands, Flamingo, Stardust, and other casinos dimmed for 10 minutes. This uncommon honor changed into for Martin. The metropolis that he had helped make famous with his wit, song, and fashion, stated its very last goodbye. His buddies, along with Jerry Lewis, Don Rickles, and Shirley Mann, collected for a personal memorial. The darkened strip reminded all of ways much Martin supposed to Las Vegas. However, the Martin-owned family's heartbreak did not stop there. On August 3, 2016, Martin's youngest son, Ray Chi, turned into found useless at 62 in Utah. The cause of death turned into never shared. Ray Chi had spent his life celebrating his father's legacy. Just 3 weeks later, John Martin died of cancer at age 89. She had already lived through the loss of Dean Paul and now Richie. The short loss of each mom and son closed an unhappy chapter for the own family. Even after all of the reputation and glory, the Martin story resulted in deep sorrow with the ache of their losses felt for years yet to come.